Are you ready to live more authentically and explore who you truly are? Would you love to know how to get there? Hi, I am Jamie Graham Duprey, teacher, author, coach, and host of The Second Half. Throughout the show, we will consider how we can be people who show up honestly, speaking in truth and love, and vulnerably, sharing and reflecting on life experiences. You will be encouraged to make connections in your life that will dare you to explore powerful growth, personally, vocationally, and spiritually. Are you ready to consider how to develop and nurture a growth mindset, take ownership of your life, and create action steps that lead you to being bold, brave, and healthy? The second half starts now. Good morning. Welcome to the second half. As you heard in that fun intro, my name is Jamie Graham Duprey, and you can join me here on the Transformation Radio Network live the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month at 9 o'clock Mountain, or find me on any streaming or any place where you find podcasts. This morning, I may or may not have a guest joining me today. There might have been some miscommunication as far as the time zone and just some details, which is okay, because part of the reason I am doing this podcast, the second half, is to enter into spaces that might not be so comfortable all the time, with the hope of learning more about myself and exploring personal growth. So we're going to trust spirit here today and just go for it. The second half is titled in this way because I have been on a journey, specifically in the last 6 years, where I've been considering who I am, what I'm passionate about, and what I'm doing about that. That was what we discussed in the first episode. I like to call it our pilot episode, a couple weeks ago. And so today, the focus is to talk about the word power and the phrase claiming my power, claiming one's power. So if you have not had a chance to listen to my first episode, go ahead and find that either here on Transformation Network or again on my website, which is coachdupre.com, or anywhere else that you might find a podcast. And you'll see that I will be exploring ways to claim who I am, what I'm about, and encourage others to consider these same questions. So with that, the guest I was going to have today, I have her book with me. I received it in the mail yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to read it all. But the book is by Rozella Haydée White. She is an author, a female clergy person, and a coach. And her book is called Love Big: The Power of Revolutionary Relationships to Heal the World. And I'll just go through the thoughts and the conversations that she and I discussed. We met in August, just a little bit ago here, just last month, for an event where she was the keynote speaker for a group of about 100 women in ministry across 7 different states that run along the Interstate I-25. So we talked a lot about claiming who we are. So power, let's just dive right into that word. When I say power, I wonder what that brings up for you. So maybe take a second here and think about that word and how it strikes you. If I ask, what does the word power evoke for you and bring up? The first time I was asked that specific question was, I'm going to continue on with a story that I shared in my first podcast when my spouse, Jeremy, was talking to me about this leadership conference I went to 6 years ago. And the whole week was super intense. And the 3 main questions they asked and wanted us to explore and dive deep into is, our guest is here. We're going to jump into a super quick break and invite Rozella on, and we will continue with this. I know you are sitting there with bated breath, but exhale and grab a cup of coffee, and we will be back here in just a couple minutes with special guest Rozella Haydée White. All right, welcome back to the second half. I am your host, Jamie Graham Duprey, and our special guest is joining us right now, and her name is Rozella Haydée White. She is the Love Big coach. And Rozella, I would just like you to say hello, introduce yourself, and just share a little bit about yourself with our guests this morning.
Of course. Well, thank you for having me on today, Jamie. As Jamie mentioned, I am the Love Big coach, and I say that my singular focus in life is to nurture life-giving and justice-seeking love so all can thrive. I'm just naive enough to believe that love has the power to heal and transform us all. And so that's what I believe. That's how I show up in the world. And the way that I do that is through a couple of businesses where I provide coaching, organization development support, executive and team leadership support, and also personal development. So that's how I share my gifts with the world.
Well, thank you for sharing, Rozella. And I got to meet, I mentioned this earlier, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, last August, where we were at a gathering of about 100 female ministry leaders, female pastors, and Rozella was our worship leader and also our keynote speaker. And she got to share with us a lot about her story and also talked to us about claiming who we are, what we're passionate about, what we're doing about that. And so the theme of our episode today, like I said, is power. And that's a big word. Yeah, I asked listeners to think about that word. Rozella, would you mind sharing a little bit about your relationship with the word power?
Wow. So, and I think, Jamie, you and I talked about this a little bit when we were in Sioux Falls together, but for the longest time, I think I had an ambivalent relationship to the word power and to power in and of itself, right? Like, I feel like being raised in a progressive faith-based household, right? It was about not thinking of yourself too highly, right? We didn't really talk about power. But I knew what abuses of power looked like and felt like. So I knew that I didn't want to have that relationship, but otherwise didn't really think too much about power in and of itself. And it wouldn't be until almost in my early 30s, I took a community organizing training. That was a week-long training that totally shifted how I think about power, how I think about money and influence, and how I think about leadership. And so from that point forward, I would say that I moved from ambivalence as it related to power to embracing, right, being powerful and leading with power. And so in this season of my life, I'm actually someone who wants power. And I want power because I know how it can be used to shift and transform people's lives, to shift and transform culture, to shift and transform how we view money and injustice. So now I'm very clear that I want power, and that I'm not ambivalent towards it anymore, that it can be a good thing. But I also think we know that it can be misused. And so I'm always trying to find and seek out relationships and communities where accountability is a value that we hold, so that I'm held accountable to what my values are and to how I'm using power for good.
Ooh, I love those words, that accountability. And I thought about the word caution. With great responsibility, with great power comes, or with great responsibility.
With great power. Yeah, it's the Marvel quote, right? Uncle Ben talking to Spider-Man, to Peter Parker. And he says, with great power comes great responsibility.
Thank you. I love that. Yeah. I love that. And that's one of my favorite quotes, even though I couldn't draw it up, but thank you. That's the power of partnership here.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So ambivalence to embrace. I love that. The first time I was asked to specifically think about my relationship with power, I had a negative response to it. And I think the same thing, maybe Rozella, that you're saying. I thought about abuse of power and people in positions that use it only to climb up for their own personal needs and not understanding their responsibility to others. So it was really interesting at first for me to just kind of hold my hands up and say, no, I don't want power, but I am very similar to you now. I look to claim my power so that I can build others up as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And in your book, I was just saying, I got this in the mail yesterday, so I have my little bookmark in. I haven't read it all, but the cover is beautiful. I'm big on
Thank
looking
you.
at covers. I know the time that it takes to figure that out. And again, Rosella's book is called Love Big, The Power of Revolutionary Relationships to Heal the World. So there you see in her title, she has those big words. She has that word power. And arguably more importantly, the word love is overall the theme of her message. So, Rozella, let's explore that together. We talk about power, claiming it, using it to support others. Where does love play in here?
Yeah. So I am someone who is of the progressive faith tradition, Christian faith tradition. And growing up, we always would hear text around God being love, right? God is love. And so, as I was thinking about this book and my first kind of solo entry, because I've done a bunch of contributions and other writing, I knew that I wanted to center in on the concept of love. And I wanted to kind of do that double entendre that I'm talking about God, but I'm also talking about what people have long thought of as an emotion, but I'm really talking about it as a force, right?
Mm.
And so for me, God is love. And when I look at who God is and how God is, right, I see God as creator, I see God as liberator, and I see God as sustainer, right? And so for me, when I think about love, I think about love as this force that creates and that liberates and that sustains us as we're seeking out individual and collective healing for the sake of holistic transformation. And I would say the other piece of my relationship with love is that I'm quite literally probably one of the world's biggest romantics. I mean, I haven't done any major surveys on this, but given who I am and how I've been my entire life, I've always been an extraordinarily sensitive person. I have loved love stories. I used to collect romance books. To this day, my favorite my favorite fiction is going to be something romance, historical romance. Like I'm a romantic. I mean, I'm also a Cancer in terms of my astrology sign. And so all of those things come together to make me really a lover. I'm a lover of people. I'm a lover of culture. I'm a lover of all that is good in life. And so this was really an exploration for me to deepen and hopefully invite people to expand how they think about love as not, again, just a feeling, but love as a force. And also, I wanted to continue to build on, and I mean, I say this with really all humility, but I am very much informed by people like Bell Hooks and James Baldwin, people that lived with what we call a love ethic, right? A way of being in the world that was grounded in love. But again, love as a force and as a power that requires certain things from us, right? That we're responsible for certain ways of being and believing and behaving when we say we're rooted in a love ethic. It shifts how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to others.
Amen. Yes, yes. That gives me a lot of energy and excitement hearing your passion, hearing you share about love as a force and a power. It reminds me of you hit it right on the head when we think of love often, especially arguably in our culture. I also have a couple teenagers at my house. So
Mm-hmm,
this really hits home when you say we think of it so much as an emotion. And it is. And if you look in scripture and see the different there's not just one word for love in the Greek and the Hebrew, right?
right.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that the agape love
Yeah,
here, that this is an active love, this is a responsibility we have, this is a power, this is a force that we get to choose to embrace as gift and also use in our life intentionally through our relationships, through how we show up.
absolutely. And I love that you brought up the different words for love, right? In the Greek, in English, we're quite limited in our language that we only have one word, but there's so many types of love. And so to invite people to the agape understanding of it, even as the other types of love flow through our lives, the friendship love, the brotherly love, the intimate love, the love for community, right? All of those are important to also embody But this is really about that expansive love, right? That roots and grounds us in our ways of being.
Absolutely. So before I move on to just chatting a little bit about connecting with love, the power of love, um, this morning I was humming to myself and I thought, I just want to share this because it's a fun story. And you talked about yourself, Rozella, as being a romantic. And I smile as I say that because same. And I would argue with people that say maybe they're not, like, we all want the love story, whether we're watching. You talked about the Marvel movie before. Okay, we might have, yeah, we're big and tough and we like Marvel movies, and we love the love story. So I was thinking of the Huey Lewis and the News song that I believe my parents had on a cassette tape back in the day when you'd go on a road trip and you just listen to the same songs. And Huey Lewis and the News had a song called The Power of Love. And I hadn't looked up the lyrics before, but I'm going to share those just for fun.
Oh, yes.
And then I'll ask you another question as we get to the last part of our time together. So Huey Lewis says, the power of love is a curious thing. Make one man weep, make another man sing, change a hawk to a little white dove. More than a feeling, that's the power of love. And he goes on, but as I hear you speak, I have this song in my head, and there's just an energy here too. And as you said, a force. So it's just really fun seeing that everything is connected by love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that made me think about too, Valerie Kaur, the creator of the Revolutionary Love Project. She talks about grief being the price we pay for love, right? So I think about that lyric of making one person weep, right? We know when we're grieving that a lot of the times it's because we had loved or we had hoped, and that has now been lost. And so grief is the price that we pay. I think joy also is another outcome of loving deeply and loving big. And so, yeah, all of that, you run through the gamut of emotions when you are relating to yourself and the world in a loving posture.
Oh, yeah. I believe I read that in your book. And I'm so glad you brought that up, that grief is a price we pay, that to love big is risky and
Yes.
and worth it.
Yes.
So, okay. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think the name of this podcast is The Second Half. And as a fellow author, you know that figuring out titles for either your articles or for your book or for a podcast or whatever is a big deal. And it has to have some connection to you. So for me, The Second Half is fun because it touches on my memoirs that I wrote about first growing up through my high school years, those formative years, and then next about my college years. And woven into both of those, especially in the first one, is sports, is basketball. That was my thing. That was my passion growing up, and how I found identity and role and explored all those things of relationship and discipline. And so that was very obvious as far as there's a first half of the game, there's a second half of the game. In college, it was also a theme. And at the same time, at the end of that memoir, The Green Clad Kicker, I start exploring, quote, adult life. And what does that look like? So you can look at the second half. So, and for me now, I think about it as being a second half life liver, being more intentional, choosing to live well, thinking about how I want to show up. What does the second half mean for you?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. And I feel like I'm firmly in middle age, right? I think our 40s, I'm 43, and God willing, I will live as long as I need to live with a sound mind and body. And looking at my family, looking at, life expectancy, between late 80s, early 90s is when people tend to die. So I'm looking at like, oh, we're literally facing the second half of life, right?
Yeah.
So when I hear second half, I think about that. First of all, I think about my mortality, which I've never had a problem thinking about. I was a chaplain for years, and I also worked with hospice and palliative care. So mortality is not something that fears I'm afraid of, right? It doesn't invoke fear for me. But I also think about the opportunity it provides, right? Because the second half allows us to practice or embrace the concept of Sankofa, right? This West African concept that basically says it's not bad to go back and get what was lost as you continue to move forward. So for me, I'm thinking through like there are things in the first half of life that I'm releasing, but there are also things that I want to pull through and then hopefully engage them differently, and they have a different role in this next half of my life. And also recognizing that, another 40 years would be a gift. And so it invites me to be, I think, a little bit more intentional about how I want to spend my time and how I want to show up in the world. So it's an exciting thing for me to think about being in the second half of life.
I love that. Again, Rozella, the energy you're bringing is so, yeah, that really resonates. I just turned 40 last March, and I think you just said you're excited and what a gift life is. So instead of maybe the fear that death often brings up for us, and maybe again, culturally, we don't always handle that well. Thanks for bringing that up for us to consider how we want to intentionally live our second half, or wherever we are in our lives right now, what we want to release. That was beautiful. And also what we might want to pull through and consider what was lost, or what we might need to process through before we move forward to be as authentic as we can, showing up in our day-to-day relationships and using the power of love to bless our others. So man, that went quick. We are about to wind up our time together. But again, Rozella Haydée White, she will be on the info. If you didn't get a chance to catch us the whole episode today, that's fine. Just find us anywhere where you find podcasts. You can find this episode in a few hours later today on my website, coachdupre.com, also on the Transformation Radio Network. And go ahead and connect with us. Rozella and I both love that as people who send things out in written form or share in this way. We really like to connect and be relational. That's what it's all about. So go ahead and find my information. And Rozella, what's your website? One time for everybody.
Yeah, it's my name, RozellaHWhite.com. And you can find me across social platforms at Love Big Coach.
Excellent. Thanks so much for showing up today and just connecting with me. Remember, every second and fourth Wednesday of the month at 9:00 Mountain Time. And in the meantime, consider how you might love big or love bigger and use your power to show up authentically in your life. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening to The Second Half with Coach Duprey. Tune in on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month at 8 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio, where you will be encouraged to make connections in your life that will dare you to explore powerful growth personally, vocationally, and spiritually. For more information about me, my courses, my coaching, and my books, and how I can support you on your journey, find me on my website, coachdupre.com. See you next time.